We are back with part 3 of our drifter build series featuring a ready-to-run RMX 2.0 drifter. And today, we're going to the drifter night at our local hobby shop. But first, we're curious, what happens if you move the ESC to the back of the car? Or what happens if you move the motor to the high CG position? Well, today, let's test it. For drifters, chassis weight seems to be really critical, especially where in the chassis that weight is placed. If we put our RMX 2.0 on the scale, the front of the car represents 43% of the chassis weight and the rear is 57% when equipped with a low CG shorty battery. Now, some people have remarked in these build series videos that chassis weight should be close to 50-50, while other people have remarked that most of the weight should be in the rear of the car. What exactly should that perfect percentage be? I have a hunch that it varies depending on your car setup, your tires, the traction level, the surface, and your driving style. The ideal setup depends on the conditions, which is why it's so important to personally run experiments with your car. Now for us in our car, we want to try experimenting by moving some weight to the back. We have a few experiments to do it, with the first being a complete relocation of the brushless speed controller to the back of the car, thanks to this aftermarket carbon fiber mounting kit from Scale Reflex. We actually got this idea from the guys over at Scale Science, but it looks like a really promising upgrade, so let's do it. We just have to take off the bumper. There's only 2 screws to get that off. And then on the other side are these aluminum mounts that are included with the ESC plate. Now, since these ESC plate mounts are aluminum, I'm gonna put just a little dab of Loctite on these screws. So now we actually need to remove the ESC. So we're gonna mount the ESC on there with just some double-sided tape, but before we do, we're gonna use some nitro cleaner and clean off the bottom of the ESC and that plate. Boom! This took maybe half an hour to mount that back there. It was really easy. So let's put it back on the scale and see how the weight distribution has changed. We need to first reset our ride height because the car is slammed in the rear end. We're not gonna drive it like that. So we need to reset our ride height to where it should be, and then we can reset our camber to where it should be, and then we can put it on the scale. Now, installing this accessory has a secondary purpose for us, and it's to allow clearance to reconfigure the battery compartment for shorty battery use, which to do, you must move these posts inward. But you can't because the chassis holes are obstructed by the ESC and you can't access a screw through that hole. So by moving the ESC, these holes will open up and we can run a screw through it for that post and finally reconfigure our battery compartment. Now, some people have asked how we've mounted our battery, and we've basically been securing a shorty LiPo in here by turning these end pieces on the battery compartment upside down, so the tab makes a floor rather than a ceiling, and then we just put foam pads in there. Back on the scale now, you can see our weight distribution has changed a bit, with the front end giving up 6% of weight and giving it to the rear end. So, let's go try it. Now on the carpet, that extra rear weight is noticed in how the car feels a little bit more comfortable with larger angles and how the rear end kind of sweeps out controllably. The difference is not as big as I thought it would be, but it does help and we're gonna leave it this way. Now to get a second opinion, we had our store employee, Chris, who spends a lot of time working and driving on drift cars. We had him drive the car to see what he thought. We just put the ESC all the way back.
I feel like it made it more agile, a little bit, like it wanted to hold a larger drift angle rather than just kind of being tight.
That's how I was feeling it too.
It feels nice for a box setup, basically. Feels really nice.
What about the motor up top? You think we should try changing that?
Yeah, I think putting the motor up top would make a big difference, give you a little bit more rotation.
Okay, and it's really easy to do.
Yeah, 3 screws.
Chris was right. Moving the motor to that high CG position takes only 5 minutes, and it's achieved by removing the 2 motor screws, pulling the motor out, and then loosening only 3 motor plate screws on the back of the transmission. And with that free, the plate freely rotates behind the spur gear, ready to be secured into position with a few position options available. This high CG motor position is not for all applications. Now, from what I understand, this high CG motor position can help when traction levels are really loose, because that high center of gravity forces the car to lean over more when you corner rather than stay flat. So when the car is leaning over, it puts more weight on that outside tire, and at the same time, that outside cambered tire is flattening out, which increases the contact patch with the surface, increasing traction. Now we put the motor in the straight up position, which actually places it further back in the chassis, which should also affect our weight distribution. So let's weigh it again, but only after we reset that ride height and camber again. With this simple and free modification, we were able to remove another 1% of weight from the front and stuck it in the back. So let's try the car. Drifter night is happening in a few hours and people are already on the track, but it was immediate feeling the improvement from that high motor position in the way the car swings out and extends its drift angle within control without looping out. Transitioning from left to right or vice versa felt more stable too, or maybe smoother. I'm kind of lacking the proper words to describe the experience, but this high CG motor change is so far the best thing we've done in terms of adding comfort and control to the car. There is one way to take this a step further. Now that our ESC is gone out of the chassis, we could use that space to shift the servo back, shifting that weight back and further serving the weight bias of this car. It requires a 68mm long turnbuckle, a 3x68 to do it, but with it, it should better help the car and that weight bias. Now that's all I got for you guys. I think it's time that we head over to the local hobby shop and attend our drifter night. Big thanks to all the people who attended that drifter night and let me film them or their cars. I really appreciate it, and I know it's kind of awkward. This drifter night was not put on for this video series. The timing just happened to work out really well. So another big thank you to the guys at the retail store for hosting this night. They provided pizzas and a raffle to everybody, plus unlimited drifting. Guys, go check out the RMX 2.0 drifter down below with our links. And for more RC, check out these videos.